But as we're doing that, in order to disrupt the system, I'll just sort of leave you all with, where do we start and what exactly is the system that we're disrupting? So if we want that bigger goal, is our system disruption goal big enough? So if we want that bigger goal, Carlo, what would you leave us with? So I'm just going to ask you a mathematical, not a real mathematical question. Like, on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being perfect, how broken do you and your fellow advisors think our school systems are?
To be honest, I don't think I could put it in numerically. I feel like that might be just slightly disrespectful to the teachers who are amazing in my classes and
we're talking
have
about the
inspired
system.
me. But yeah, the system.
We're talking about the system, not the
Okay,
teachers. Again,
I'd say 3.
okay. But I think your comment is really important. Mm-hmm. There are always going to be incredible teachers and incredible educators who take risks and step outside and go the extra mile to have make the kind of learning experiences that we want. But if we're talking equity, which is right up there at the top, advancing equity, we're going to have to not have those folks be the exception to the rule. And that's what systems are about. How do we, if we're going to disrupt the system? So, Atyani, where do you start? I mean, where do we start this process?
I mean, I think it's twofold. One, it's shifting, not even shifting, it's a complete reimagining of what school can be and do. And again, I think as a field, we've tinkered around the edges of that, and part of what the last couple of years have created an opening for is a complete reimagining. And that's what we're trying to do at New Teacher Center, is articulate what could a school where educators and students are humanized and challenged in balance, what does that look like? How do you begin to do that? And so you can, Karen, what you've said to me is like, yeah, we can keep the box of school, the container, because it has to be there and it's the structure we have to work with. But what's happening within that box and the purpose of that box needs to be radically reimagined and then articulated. And then we need to help educators not only have access to the learnings, but the experiences. To your point about, our colleague at EL Education, the experiences themselves that are going to support them with creating those kinds of transformational experiences for students. And I think in that reimagining, that's where this conversation about who is an educator and how do we shift and broaden and expand to be more inclusive of that definition comes into play. And lastly, I would say, in all of that, really understanding that, the end goal, you can teach a child to read, you can teach them to do math, but to what end? And shouldn't we all, those of us who have had the privilege of being educated, be able to determine what we want to do with that? And I think that's a deceptively simple nuance, particularly when you're talking about disruption for marginalized communities, because there's one pathway, which is college. And that's the sole arbiter of whether or not you're breaking the cycle of generational poverty and you're creating equity. Except for middle class kids, it's, well, college is assumed, and if they deviate from that path, it's not considered necessarily detrimental to their future. And I say all of that to say, I think that's where some of this reimagining, particularly around what is equity and who gets to thrive and how do we define thriving and those kinds of questions come into play in terms of how we're reshaping what goes on within the box of school and what we're actually disrupting at the core.